This week's trip report is a little bit different. We're going to cross the Rocky Mountains. I'm a big history buff. I think back to, the covered wagon days in the late 1800s. Can you imagine going across the prairie land? Everything is basically flat, and your wagon train is going along. And then you come to the Rocky Mountains, a huge wall of stone and rock going up to some, 12,000, 15,000 feet. Now, there are road trips, and then there are journeys that remind you of just how enormous, rugged, and magnificent this country really is. For Sharon and I, one of the most unforgettable journeys was crossing the Rocky Mountains on our way to California. Sharon's a native Californian, by the way. Our route carried us through Wyoming, so we kind of went the northern road. There's two basic routes, and actually three, and we'll talk about that. So we went through Wyoming, where the highway seemed to stretch endlessly towards a wall of distant mountain. Farther west we traveled, the bigger the sky became, and the smaller we felt, and the more dramatic the landscape grew. Today, we can cross the Rockies with climate control, satellite navigation, paved highways, roadside assistance, and cup holders large enough to accommodate a small aquarium. But it wasn't always that easy. Long before highways, railroads, and wagon trains, indigenous peoples had traveled through these mountains for generations. They knew the valleys, the seasonal routes, the rivers, the hunting grounds, the water sources, and the natural passageways through the terrain that appeared impenetrable to white newcomers. The first European American explorers didn't so much discover these passages as learn them, sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly. And they learned about these routes from native people who already understood the topography. One of the most important passageways was the South Pass in present day Wyoming. Unlike the towering, narrow mountain passes many people imagine, South Pass is pretty broad and relatively gradual. In places, it's so subtle that early travelers reportedly crossed the Continental Divide without realizing that they had done so. And that gentle grade changed American history. In 1812, Robert Stewart and a small party returning east from the Pacific Northwest traveled through the area and recognized this southern passage could provide a practical and easy route across the Continental Divide. The War of 1812 overshadowed their report, and the significance of the South Pass discovery was largely forgotten for many years. Then, in 1832, Captain Benjamin Bonneville led a wagon caravan across the South Pass, demonstrating that wheeled vehicles could make the crossing. That was the breakthrough. If wagons could cross the Rocky Mountains, then families, supplies, livestock, mail, and eventually entire communities could move west. South Pass became one of the most important gateways in the country. Oregon Trail, California Trail, the Mormon Pioneer Trail, the Pony Express routes, all pass through this general corridor. Between 1840 and about 1870, 1869, an estimated 500,000 immigrants crossed South Pass on the way to Oregon and California, Utah, and other destinations west. Think about that for a minute. 500,000 people pass through this remote Wyoming landscape without engines, without paved roads, without any weather forecasts or emergency services, with everything on their back and in their wagon. Amazing. They traveled in wagons at perhaps 2 or 3 miles per hour. They faced violent storms, swollen rivers, broken axles, sick animals, dwindling food, disease, accidents, exhaustion, restless natives. For them, crossing the Rockies wasn't a scenic day on the highway. It was a test of endurance and a matter of survival. Today, modern travelers crossing Wyoming will often use Interstate 80. It runs more than 400 miles across the southern part of the state and roughly follows the great east to west transportation corridor that later attracted stagecoach routes, the Transcontinental Railroad, the Lincoln Highway, U.S. Highway 30 and 50, and eventually the entire interstate highway system. Now, driving across Wyoming can be deceptive. The mountains don't always rise directly in front of you like a giant stone wall. Much of the crossing consists of high plains, rolling terrain, long grades both up and down, and broad basins. At one point, Interstate 80 crosses the Continental Divide and it enters the Great Divide Basin. It's kind of unusual because its water doesn't drain towards either the Atlantic or the Pacific. There's actually a point, there's a sign that'll tell you water from this side of the Continental Divide goes towards the Atlantic Ocean. On this side, it goes towards the Pacific. Interesting. Instead of remaining trapped within the basin or evaporating or soaking into the ground, water goes from one way to the other. It's a vast, stark, windswept landscape up there, and it can make you feel as though you're traveling across another planet. Wyoming is also a place where drivers, especially those towing an RV, need to respect the weather. The winds can be relentless. There have been reports and documented reports of the wind tipping over semi-trailer trucks and trailers. Sudden gusts can push a trailer towards the next lane before the driver even has time to react. Snow and ice can arrive surprisingly early or late in the season, and road closures are not uncommon during severe conditions. Before crossing the Rockies, RVers should check the weather, monitor state road reports, secure everything inside and outside the rig, and pay close attention to high wind warnings. Slow down, leave extra following distance, and never allow the impatience of another driver to determine your speed. The mountains have been there for millions and millions of years. They'll wait for you. Wyoming may have provided our route west, but it is certainly not the only spectacular way to cross the Rockies. Further south, U.S. Route 50 crosses Colorado and climbs over Monarch Pass. This is another one of America's truly great scenic drives. The highway rises to more than 11,000 feet above sea level and crosses the Continental Divide between the Arkansas River Valley and Colorado's western slope. The views can be extraordinary, but the climb demands respect. There are extended grades, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11%. Sharp curves, rapidly changing weather, and the possibility of snow, even when conditions at lower elevations are perfectly pleasant. Anyone towing an RV should begin the climb or the descent With a properly maintained vehicle, good tires, healthy brakes, and a transmission ready for mountain work. We're going to have a special on tow vehicle maintenance and enhancements in a future episode. On the descent, use your lower gears and allow the engine to help control your speed. Don't ride your brakes continuously. Heavy braking creates heat, and overheated brakes can fade precisely when you need them most. Pull over when it's safe. Let the equipment cool down. You're not in any hurry. Enjoy the view. And remember that reaching the bottom 10 minutes later is preferable to reaching it 10 seconds too soon at an uncontrollable speed. Another popular crossing is Interstate 70 through Colorado. You pass west from Denver through the Eisenhower-Johnson Memorial Tunnel and onward through some of the most dramatic mountain scenery in the United States of America. There are also more adventurous routes through the Rockies. You've got the Trail Ridge Road in Rocky Mountain National Park, U.S. Highway 40 over Birdhound Pass, and numerous scenic highways that climb through forests, alpine meadows, and high mountain valleys. Some of them are appropriate for RVs. Others demand careful research, favorable weather, and an honest assessment of both your vehicle and your driving skills. No matter which route you choose, crossing the Rocky Mountains remains one of America's greatest travel experiences. There's something humbling about watching the landscape rise around you. The air becomes thinner, the trees change, snow appears on distant peaks even in the summer, rivers begin flowing in the opposite direction, and somewhere along the way you cross that invisible line separating waters bound for the Atlantic and bound for the Pacific, the Continental Divide. For Sharon and I, the photographs captured the mountains, the highways, and the scenery. But the real memory was the sense of movement, the feeling that we were following a path west that people had dreamed about, struggled across, and sometimes died in the attempt to reach destinations west. We crossed in comfort, on pavement, with a dependable vehicle and food available at each exit. The immigrants crossed with wagons, animals, sheer determination, and very little certainty about what waited on the other side of those mountains. The routes have changed, the equipment has changed, the journey has become faster and safer, but the Rockies still command your attention, your preparation, and your respect. Whether you cross through Wyoming, climb Monarch Pass on US 50, or follow one of the many other routes through the mountains, take your time. Enjoy the trip. Stop at the overlooks. Read all the historical markers. Think about the people who traveled these same corridors before pavement transformed the West. Most importantly, look up from the highway once in a while and take it all in, because crossing the Rockies isn't merely a way to reach the West Coast. It's one of those rare journeys where the road itself becomes the attraction and the destination becomes worthwhile. It is an experience that Sharon and I will never forget, and we look to do it again very soon. For Out and About TV, I'm Tom McAuliffe. Thanks for watching.
Bye.